Hello, everyone. Actually, went live a little earlier than I was planning to. I was just making my little description and then accidentally hit go live, but it's all good. I mean, I was gonna go live at 11:45, and it's 11:43, so I am here. I'm gonna do my own test because last time I was trying to do my live stream. Yesterday, I was doing my live stream, and don't y'all know, nobody could hear anything I was saying. And I had no way of like testing it out as I was going, and I was just talking along, and nobody was hearing me. And that's just like the worst thing when you're doing a video. You hate to be like on video talking and just talking and talking and talking, and nobody can hear you. So I'm hoping that does not happen today. If anybody is tuning in and they hear or they don't hear me talking, then they know that my audio is not working, and just let me know if it's not working. So if you hear me, then let me know. And if you don't hear me, let me know. If you can just let me know. So we are getting started right now with this Kwanzaa talk. So just let me know in the chat that you can hear me. That'll help me to know that I am not just talking to the wind. So I'm gonna go ahead and just wait a little bit since I said 11:45. Give people like a minute to log in. But while we are waiting for people to log in, just let me know in the chat that you can hear me, and that'll help me to know that I can be at peace knowing that my audio is working. So just let me know, and we're gonna get started in just a minute. So I'm gonna just test it out myself. We're just gonna do it. Just do what we gotta do today. Let's see. I'm gonna listen to it on my phone until I hear from somebody that they can hear me. Let's see. All right. So let me just do this. Let's see. Let's see. All right, I can hear myself, so we good. All right, I can hear myself, so we good. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I was just testing out my audio. I had to hear it myself because if you joined in yesterday, you probably saw my many failed attempts to do a live broadcast, and it just was not working. My audio just would not work, and I was not able to figure out why, and I was not able to figure out what I needed to do. But we are here live today. I'm attorney Veronica McClendon. I'm the owner and CEO of McClendon Law and Consulting in Georgia, and we work with families who own heirs property. We also work very specifically, a big part of our practice going into the new year is going to be estate planning. So that's wills and trusts and other things to make sure that that your legacy is secured, that you have your plans in place to make sure that your family can benefit from the property that you have and that you leave behind, and that your legacy is the way that you want it to be. So that is what we're going to be focusing on going into the new year. McClendon Law and Consulting is going to specialize just solely on estate planning as our practice area going into the new year. We will see if, at some point we may open back up to other things, but right now our focus is going to be estate planning until we kind of get some things in place that we want to get in place. But I will continue to be on YouTube live and on YouTube talking about heirs property because I really am passionate about this topic. If you have done anything with heirs property, you know how complex this area of law can get. We're dealing with a lot of people, and all those people may not be on the same page. Some of them may be on the same page, others are not. We're dealing with very complicated land ownership situations where people may have died and had multiple heirs. Some of those heirs are documented, some of them are not documented. And sometimes we have people in the family who are transferring their property interest to other people outside the family. So that just expands the number of people who are owning this family property. And so heirs property, it's something that is pretty unique in terms of an area of practice because we have so many people involved. A lot of time working on the heirs property case, I could have 20, 30, 50 people who I'm having to keep track of when it comes to heirs property. And so for that reason, we have plenty of cases already on our docket. So for the time being, we're going to just focus on those and just really pour into those cases. And we're going to, as a firm, focus primarily on estate planning, which is going to be more the preventative side. We're helping families to prevent the issues with heirs property that a lot of people have. So that's kind of what we're doing going into the new year. I probably will be doing a video within the next week or so where I give a little more detail about my vision for the firm, where we're going, and what I'm hoping that we will accomplish this year, or what we will accomplish this year. I'm using more faith forward words this year, and not so much of we hope and maybe we'll see and let's go ahead and see what's going on. Like we going forward this year. I was on a coaching call this morning with a coach that I work with, and he does a call every day. So like I said, we were on there this morning. It's New Year's Day, and we were on that call this morning. We were on that call on Christmas Day. Like I said, every day. And today he was just encouraging us to make this our best year ever and to really like commit to that, because y'all know how it is on New Year's Eve. New Year's Day, you start feeling the reality of what you committed to, and you're like, "Ooh, all right, I said I was going to start going to the gym. I guess that it's going to start today." But on New Year's Eve, you're feeling all hopeful. You got these lists of goals that you're going to accomplish, and you're like, "I'm going to do it." So he said this year. But the thing about making it happen is that like it takes a lot of commitment and working against your own internal blocks. You know, those things that tell you, well, we'll work on it next year, or I don't really want to deal with that right now. I need to focus on. So for me, I'm committing that I'm gonna push forward with these goals this year. We are not going to let this year pass without seeing some things happen that have been on the list of things I wanted to happen for a long time. And so going into this heirs property talk, when we're doing our Kwanzaa reflection, today's principle of Kwanzaa is Imani. And Imani means faith in the Swahili language, and it's the seventh principle of Kwanzaa. As you know, if you've been tuning in for the past few days, I have been covering one principle of Kwanzaa each day, talking about it in the context of heirs property. As I tell y'all every day, I am not an expert in Kwanzaa. I am not an expert in Swahili. I am an expert when it comes to heirs property, estate planning, probate, things of that nature. Do I know everything about them? Definitely don't. But I do know enough to talk to y'all, about those topics. Kwanzaa is something that I'm kind of new to, and I'm just like interested in it from the standpoint of the principles that are taught about during the season of Kwanzaa, and the potential that I believe that those principles have if they are applied. So excuse me for one moment. So if those principles are applied, I do believe there's a lot of great promise. And what I've been doing for the past few days is talking about the principles of Kwanzaa in the context of heirs property, and talking about how families can, one, implement Kwanzaa principles in working through their heirs property situations. But I've also been talking about how heirs property is representative of the Kwanzaa principles. So it's like, how do the Kwanzaa principles help us to solve challenges with heirs property? But then also, how do the Kwanzaa principles show up in how family property is typically owned and managed, and how we work together? So that's what we're going to continue to talk about today. As I say every time, I love it when y'all talk to me in the chat, because it lets me know what's important to you. It lets me know what questions you have, and helps me to be able to talk about stuff that actually makes sense to you and actually is relevant to you. I also ask that you please like this video. Like this video to let me know that you are here. If you are not already a subscriber to my channel, I encourage you to go ahead and subscribe so that we can keep you in our community. But like I said, let me know that you are here in the chat. Let me know if you have questions about heirs property, about estate planning, anything that is going to help you and your family on your journey. Let me know in the chat. If you have a story to tell that you think is on point for the topic for today, you can share that in the chat as well. I love hearing from y'all so that I can know that we are on the same page and we're actually like having a real conversation together. So, all that being said, today's principle, again, like I said a few minutes ago, is Imani, which stands for faith, and the way that the official Kwanzaa website describes it. And I don't know if it's really official and who's determined that it's official, but that's what they call it. So I'm going to call it the same thing. It says to believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. And so, that's faith. That's definition of faith. A lot of times, we also not necessarily in the Kwanzaa context specifically, but in general, when we say faith, we also talk about faith in God or faith in whoever we believe in is our the creator of the world. However, we name the creator, however we describe the one who is all powerful. I don't believe that God is as concerned about names as God is concerned about how we honor our creator, how we reflect on I don't know. I'm not a theologian either, so I gotta be careful how I talk, but I just believe that there is more than just us. And I believe that that's what this concept of faith is about, is understanding that there's more than that just us as individuals, and knowing that because it's bigger than us, we have the power to make a change in our lives individually, collectively, to make change in our community. And so when we are having faith, when we're having that belief, again, in with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle, that helps us to continue on. So, when I'm talking about this in the context of heirs property, what comes to mind what comes to mind for me is that we, when we're working on our family property, we have to have a belief in something bigger than what's in front of us, because a lot of times heirs property situations, you're not going to get an immediate return on your investment. I know a lot of people come to me thinking, hey, Attorney McClendon, I need you to help me to solve my heirs property issue so that me and my family can become multimillionaires. It's like, it's usually, if that's going to happen, it's not going to happen tomorrow or next week. It's going to be a longer process. Many of the heirs property cases I'm working on, they take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to take care of. And it can just continue to get longer depending on money, because these things are not going to be inexpensive. It's going to depend on, can we get our family together? A lot of times I'm working with families where the first person in the family to own the property died in like the 50s or the 60s, and they had 10 kids, and all those 10 kids are also deceased, and some of the grandkids are deceased. A lot of them often are. So when we're talking about these folks who have been deceased for a long time and have had many heirs and descendants, then it's not going to be a quick turnaround to get this thing cleaned up. And that's the harsh reality that I have to tell my clients about. And it's also the harsh reality that it took me a few years to really understand as an attorney who practices in heirs property. You kind of had this idea that I'm going to get in there, we're going to figure this thing out, and we're going to get the folks done. And then you realize that there's so much. There's the actual just doing the research, where you have to trace the ownership of the property back to the first person in your family to get the property is usually where we're kind of, that's like my target usually. But I want to find out how they got the property. And some people think you got to go all the way back to the King's Grant, to where, and maybe it's not the King's Grant, but it might be like the government grant of the land, however it worked. Some people think you got to go all the way back there, but I at least I want to find out how did my clients' ancestor or ancestors get an ownership interest in this property. So I go back all the way to when they got that property via deed, or sometimes it'd be a court order, or sometimes all we have is an affidavit to be able to show us how this person got this property. And that's an affidavit where someone would say, so-and-so got this property in this way, and they've been living here for this amount of time. Sometimes it's all you may have. But we go back as far as we can to see how did the property come into my clients' family, and then we have to trace all the descendants from that time forward. In addition to that, we have to understand if there have been any issues with the boundaries, because sometimes with these older properties, when the land was surveyed, it may not have been surveyed in a way that we can tell where the boundaries are today. I've seen like these little hand drawn maps that were done, and that's like supposed to be the plat for the land, and it's just like that's not going to help me. So sometimes we got to get the land resurveyed. There's so much that goes into it, and there's a lot of money that's needed because you're going to have to pay a lawyer. You got to pay somebody to do the title research. You got to pay the land surveyor. You got to pay the courts a lot of times. And if you actually do go to court, you're going to have a lot of different players. You're going to have the judge, who you don't have to pay, but you have to pay court filing fees. But then you have to pay special masters. Here in Georgia, we have lawyers who are called special masters, and they basically govern the proceedings of the heirs property case. We also have the sometimes we'll have a court appointed guardian ad litem to represent the interests of heirs who are deceased. And so that's a lawyer that's appointed by the court to make sure that people who are either deceased or we can't find them, that they have a legal representative in court. You have to pay experts and people to do partitions. Sometimes you have to pay somebody to sell the property if that's the goal. Whatever ends up happening, you have all of these different pieces of the puzzle that have to be covered. And again, going back to faith, you got to have a lot of faith to know that the task that you're working on is worth it. A lot of times families are getting caught up. They're getting caught up in just like, like things not moving fast enough, or family members bickering, or things are not looking the way they want them to look. And so what they need to do is lean back on their faith. Hey, we believe that this is something that we've been called to do. We believe this is something that's important to our families, and making sure that we are holding on to what we're expecting out of this situation, and knowing that it may not be a straight path there, knowing that it may take a little longer to get there, but as long as we keep our eyes on the prize, that's what matters the most. And so that's what I guess this principle of Kwanzaa, how it falls into heirs property. The way I see it is that it takes a lot of faith to actually embark on the quest to get clear ownership of your family property, and to create a structure to manage that property moving into the future. And so you got to have that in mind, going into this. So that's how it kind of plays in for me. Y'all see, I'm kind of like I'm like, okay, I feel like I kind of have said what I got to say. So what I'm going to say now is, if you have any questions, any comments you want to put in the chat, I invite you to, for one, let me know that you're here. Just say, hey, what's up? And also just let me know if you have any questions or anything that you want to add or contribute to this. I started out with talking about the definition of faith as it pertains to Kwanzaa and this official Kwanzaa website, how they define faith. Again, is to believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. And I put this in the context of heirs property to say that this cause of, I want to reclaim my ancestral land. I want to preserve the legacy of my grandparents. I want to allow my family to return to the land that our ancestors once owned, so that we can use this property for our benefit moving into the future. So that is often what's going to ground you in this process. That immediate feeling that I'm going to get some money, an immediate return on your investment, is not often going to be enough to ground you, because an immediate return on your investment in heirs property is just not very realistic. So it's just stuff to think about. I wanting y'all to go ahead and put some questions and comments in the chat to give me some more stuff to talk about that's relevant to what y'all want to talk about. while I do that, I will let y'all know about my shirt. So it says Black Pearl Books. There is a bookstore in Austin, Texas. It's a Black-owned bookstore that my friend took us to when we visited her earlier this year. And so that's a t-shirt I'm wearing. It was a really cool store. They have lots of great books, and they also have events and things like that every so often. And so if you're in Austin, Texas, make sure you stop by Black Pearl Bookstore. Really cool place. The owners were really cool. They walked us through and gave us a tour, and it's the type of place that I would love to see in my own community. So I see someone has put something in the chat. They said their mom died almost 4 years ago. She had just gotten a house built through a grant for the city, didn't have time to get a will established. As the oldest child, I was in charge. I'm so sorry to hear that. That's a tough thing because a lot of times things happen and we just don't even have time to plan, or we're not thinking about planning. And that's why it's so important that we begin planning before we even need to. All of us know that we won't live forever. None of us will live forever on this earth, as far as any of us know. And so knowing that, having a will or a trust in place, it's just for everybody. It's just a part of living that I think most of us don't really think about on a regular basis, but I think it's something that everybody needs to have that in place so that things don't fall on our loved ones in a way that they're scrambling to figure out what happens. And in this case, I see they still have some more statements. I was told by the builder to complete airship paperwork, but still haven't. What are the ramifications of not filing the paperwork yet? So it really depends on a lot of factors. Um, Here in the state of Georgia, you might have to probate the estate, or you could file affidavits of descent. In some places, they call them airship affidavits, but it just really depends on what um, what your state laws will be. But what really needs to happen is if when someone owns property and they die and that property is in their name, then that property is going to still be in their name until someone takes the legal actions to transfer it by probate or through affidavits. And here in Georgia, the the paperwork may still say the name of the deceased person, but the actual ownership has already transferred to the heirs. And talking to somebody I talked to the other day, they say it's the same way in Texas, in some other states where someone dies, the ownership of it immediately transfers to the heirs. However, there's not anything that legally happens to show that that transfer has happened until the family takes the steps to show who that property has transferred to. So again, it could be probate or it could be an affidavit. You just have to talk to an attorney in your state to see what criteria need to be met to determine if probate is required or probate is not required. Because Texas is very different from us. Y'all have some other proceedings and procedures that I never heard of. We don't have them here. So you really got to know, got to talk to a lawyer in your state to figure out what's going to be the best route for you. But if you don't get that stuff updated, then some of the ramifications could be things that I've seen happen would be if there was a mortgage on the property. A lot of times the property would end up being foreclosed, and the mortgage company had no legal responsibility to notify the heirs because they were in contract with the owner of the property, the person who purchased it. They don't have that contract with the heirs of that person. And so it sometimes in those cases, properties will be foreclosed because the family wasn't notified, or the mortgage lender might say, we're not talking to the family. And so we need to have somebody who actually represents the estate in order to deal with things concerning the mortgage. So that's one thing if there is a mortgage. I see in this case, there's not a mortgage. So if there's not a mortgage, there are other issues that could come up. Basically, the same situation where if anything happens legally that involves this property, then then there's going to be somebody who has the responsibility to notify the owner of the property. And usually they're going to go by who is on the deed, who is the record owner of the property. If they don't know who the record owner is because the family has not taken any steps to show who the owners are, then they might miss out on important notifications. So it could be lawsuits, it could be code issues or tax issues with the local government. It could be any number of things that could happen that because the family has not taken the steps to update the ownership of the property, then they're not able to they don't know who to deal with concerning this property. One thing that you mentioned in terms of being the oldest child, um, as I mentioned, you have this property that was owned by one mother, and then it went to more than one child, multiple children. Now all of you own the property together, and you all here in Georgia, all of the co-owners would have equal rights to use the property, to they equally are responsible for taxes, but people don't always share that equal responsibility. It's just you're owning property with multiple people. And so if anything's going to happen with the property, it's going to take 100% involvement from all of the heirs, which can be hard. So it just depends on how many people, but even like two or three people, if they're all required to sign a piece of paper to agree to get the roof fixed on the property, or if they have to all sign a paper to enroll in some program involving the property. Or another issue would be homestead exemption. With the tax office, a lot of times they will reduce the property taxes if the person living in the home is the owner. But if you are not the person, if you're not the owner, if you're not shown as the owner on the legal records, then you might not be able to take advantage of these types of exemptions that are available. So that's another issue that could come up. Another issue, really, it's just is when there's stuff that needs to be done with the property. A lot of times, if the property has not been properly probated, the ownership has not been transferred properly, then it's going to be a lot of work that you have to do before you can actually get to do the thing you're trying to do. So, like, for example, families might be wanting to sell a property and they can't sell it because there's no legal representative for the estate that owns the property. And so then they have to go probate the estate in order to get somebody over the property so that they can sell it. So there's a lot of different issues that could come up. I encourage families, if a family member dies and they own real estate, you want to go ahead and get their property, get their estate dealt with as soon as possible. I know there's a grieving process, so that's definitely understandable. But once that's done, you want to hurry up and get that estate settled. I've seen so many families lose their properties because they have not taken the steps to update the ownership of the property after someone has died. It also puts the property at risk of becoming more the what we call fractionalized ownership. So that means that you got a whole number, which is one, and then if multiple people own that one property, then that means they each own a fraction of the property. And if let's say that someone has died and they had three children, if one of those three children then dies and they had five children, now you have those two original children plus the five from the one who died later. So you can just imagine that as time goes on, it just gets more and more complicated. And that's what we deal with heirs property, where multiple generations of people have died and no one has taken the legal steps to actually transfer the ownership of the property to the next generation. When it comes to heirs property, there's two main issues. One is we don't have clear record of who the owners of the property are, because you have the deed of the person who once owned it and they have died, but then you have nothing to show that they're who their descendants are, who inherited their interest in the property. So that's one issue. You don't know who the owners are. When you go to the courthouse and do a search, you can't determine who the owners are when it's heirs property. In many cases. The second issue with heirs property is that I had a second issue. Oh, I have a second issue, but it's not the second issue I had in mind before. So maybe it'll come to me in a little bit. But one of the second issues One of the other issues is that it requires all of those people. I got it now. It requires all of those people to sign off on things that happen. And so, what anybody who's dealing with a property owner wants to do, they want to deal with one person. And if they can't deal with one, they might deal with two, but they don't want to deal with five. So, the other issue with heirs property is that you don't have a single point of contact to make decisions and sign off on things related to the property. And so when we are working with families to clear title to their heirs property, we want one to update the courthouse records so that you know who the owners of the property actually are and not a person who's deceased. And then two, we want to work with the family to create a shared ownership structure or transfer the ownership to a single individual. So that might be like in one of my cases, I have a property where there's a farmer and he's been farming the grandparents' land, and we got most of the family members to agree to transfer the interest to him. Most of them agreed without cost, but some of them did want to be bought out for whatever their interest was worth. But we're working to get him 100% ownership of the property. This is what the family wants because he's the one who has been farming the land for everybody for the on behalf of the family and just maintaining the land. So the family wants him to have it. In other cases, they say we want to continue to own this as a joint venture. We still want to own this property together, but we want to do it in a way that's actually going to make sense for us moving into the future. So then they might create an LLC or they might create a trust so that the property ownership goes from all of those different individual owners to a single ownership structure. And in that case, you might have one person who makes decisions for the property, or you might have a board or a committee that the family designates who would be the decision makers for that family property. So those are like the two things we're trying to accomplish. One, updating the ownership records, and then two, transferring the ownership to a single person or a single entity. Or sometimes we'll say, like, we might have a bigger piece of land and we'll divide the land up into different parcels and we'll assign one parcel to each member of the family or to each like smaller unit of the family. So instead of it being we all own our great grandparents' land together, it might be that each of us owns one share of that land and we're only in ownership, common ownership with our first cousins. It might be like a smaller unit of people. So that's some stuff about heirs property. I appreciate you for putting your question in the chat. If anybody else has any questions or anything they want to put in the chat, anything they want to share, then I welcome you to do that while we are here together. I'll be on for a few more minutes if people want to still chat. If anybody wants to share any stories or any experiences that they've had with heirs property, particularly in context of our Kwanzaa principle of today, which is Imani or faith. And again, what that means is to believe with all our heart in our people, our parents, our teachers, our leaders, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. So, as I mentioned before, I believe that heirs property and the Kwanzaa principles, that there's a lot of overlap there, and it makes sense because Kwanzaa is about family and community, and that's what heirs property is about as well. It's about family, it's about community, it's about shared ownership. And then my goal is to take us from merely having shared ownership to developing a shared vision and a shared strategy and then shared benefits. So that's how I see heirs property. A lot of times we're starting out with that shared common ownership. We want us to move down the line to where we're actually working together in a cohesive way and having a shared vision and actually trying to do something in the world with this property that we've inherited. A lot of times clients, people that I work with, I'll hear to somebody say like, y'all trying to profit off of this land and our grandparents gave it to us. Y'all didn't buy it, so why should you profit? And I get that sentiment in one sense, but I also want to encourage more people to see family land, family property as an asset, to see it as something that's worth investing in and actually being able to expect a return on your investment. I do think there is something to be said about inheriting property and then just trying to profit without putting anything into it. I do have, my own feelings about that. However, in terms of um, actually like investing in it and then being able to profit from that investment, I do think that we should encourage more people to do that, to say, hey, this is our family property. Just because we got it without having to put any skin in the game, I do believe that we should all put some skin in the game so we can enhance the value of this asset. Someone said, I think heirs should be careful with deciding trustees after death. It can be ugly business. Yeah, I would like to see more what you're thinking along those lines with that statement. But I do think that you have to be very careful about who you select as a trustee of a trust if you're going to create one, or even managers of an LLC if you're going to go that approach. You do want to make sure that you choose someone who is going to be responsible, who is going to be considerate of the needs of the collective and not just their own needs. Someone who's going to be accountable to the family and going to be willing to make reports and to explain how they're using money, how they're using property, all that kind of stuff. We want to make sure that we're choosing those folks correctly. And I see they're referencing a new decanting act in DC law. I'm gonna have to look that up because I don't know about that new act. But what decanting is in the context of a trust is when and this is not going to be a super in-depth explanation because I'm not an expert on that in that arena. It's something I'm familiar with, but it's not something that I do a lot of, I would say. So decanting is taking the assets of one trust and pouring them into another trust. So a lot of times people will they'll have a trust and they'll create a new one because the old trust is no longer serving their purposes. And so they might say we need to figure out a way to continue to have this entity to, oh, let me not put it that way. We want to continue something along the lines of what we were doing before, but something needs to change. And so in that situation, you might decant from one trust to another. So you create a new structure and you take what's in that first trust and you transfer it over to the new trust. And so I don't know anything about the new decanting act in DC law, but it's something I'm gonna have to Google and see what's going on there. Here in Georgia, we wouldn't be bound by DC law in other states, but it just might be interesting to see what's going on there and see if it has any bearing on either what states are doing now or what they may do in the future because of something that was done. Okay. So they had to handle this law. Okay. Yeah, it's something that I'm not familiar with. I had to do some more research into it. But either way, I think that the thing that's very important is that when we are creating structures, entities like trusts, LLCs, things like that, that we do use an attorney who understands the big picture. Um, there's a lot that goes into heirs property that is very unique and not necessarily applicable in other areas of law. It may look similar to something that's happening in another area of law, but it's not the same. And sometimes you'll have lawyers, like you might have a business lawyer who will create an LLC to help families own their heirs' property, but they're not really looking at the differences between having a business that is run by people who intentionally went into business together versus a business that is run by family members who came into this shared ownership without any of them like deciding to be part of it, but then it ended up that they are part of it and they're trying to make the best out of it by creating this family entity. And so there are different things that you might put into a business LLC. For example, there might be an expectation that as people die, that the remaining business owners would end up buying them out versus the heirs of that partner or that member of that LLC versus the heirs of them continuing to run the business. And so when we are creating LLCs for family properties, we have to be mindful that this is going to continue beyond the death of any individual member, because it's intended that the children of the member would now be able to participate in the LLC after their parent has died. And so there are things that principles that can be used, but they have to be adapted when you're going from another area of practice to the heirs property context. So I don't know if I do know that a lot of times there are people who are creating a trust that's for another purpose, and then they say, "Oh, we're just gonna put heirs property into it," and it's like, "Nah, we got to make sure that we're actually doing this in a way that is going to make sense for this particular family." So I'm actually working with some colleagues. We kind of took a little break because a lot of us had some family issues come up, but we were working together to create a trust that's specifically designed to hold heirs property. We got to pick that project back up in 2026, but it's something that I think needs to be done, because a trust for typical estate planning is not going to be the same kind of trust for holding heirs property, which is multi-generational property. I think it's probably more similar to what would be called a dynasty trust versus a standard estate planning trust. But I hope that if you don't understand what I'm talking about, what you take away from that is that there are so many different types of trusts, and that if you're looking at creating a trust, you really need to talk to a lawyer who understands trust and understands the different types, so that they can help you to create a trust that's going to fit your actual needs and goals. Because a lot of times people are like, I want to trust, and they don't even know like what they're trying to do with that trust. And so you have to be clear on your goals before you create the trust, or you're going to create a trust that does not accomplish your goals. And you also have to think not only of your goals, but kind of look at things from the standpoint of your family in the future, because the people in the future, they might have different goals than you do. And you have to decide, do I want to put my goals over their goals in a way that if they don't like my goals, that they could end up losing the property in the future? Or do I want to have my goals in place for now, but put some flexibility in place so that after I'm gone, those who pick the torch up after me, they will be able to make the changes and modifications that they need to make in order for things to serve their purposes at that time. So just something to think about as we are wrapping this up, and as we going into this new year, y'all. Like, I mean, we in the new year. I'm talking about going into the new year. It's a new year. I love to hear, what kind of things, if anybody is doing anything related to the heirs property going into this new year, this new journey. Share that in the chat. Anything that you want to share. My goal today is to take some time to reflect, because I have been just going, going, going. This has been a very busy holiday season for me, and I don't really know why. It's just been like nonstop. But it hasn't even been nonstop in a way that like I've been going to everybody else's parties and everybody else's this and that. But I think in work I didn't build in enough break time to really think, reflect, and plan for the new year. And I didn't I don't know, I was going too much. So I'm gonna make myself sat down somewhere this weekend so I can think and reflect and really plan for the new year. I see here, just continuing that conversation about the decanting trust. It says flexibility saves the trust from decanting acts. So yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure exactly the situation you're dealing with, but I do encourage people when it comes to these family properties that they create a structure that is going to be flexible. And so in that case, a lot of times a trust is probably not going to be the best fit. An LLC may be a better fit. And I don't know who's on the internet telling everybody they need to put their family land in a trust. It can be a good idea, but the lack of flexibility can be an issue for future generations. So I have been encouraging my clients to consider an LLC more than a trust, just because it just already has built-in flexibility, whereas a trust kind of has built-in rigidity. The goal is like we don't want people to have to change it so much. So with that being said, if for some people, like I said again, your goals, maybe your goals, and maybe you want to hold the future generations to those goals. But sometimes you want to understand that the future generation is not dealing with the same world you're dealing with. And so you want to give them some flexibility to be able to adapt to the circumstances of their time. And so again, this goes back to what I will always say. We start first with your goals, because your goals are going to determine what structure we create. And if you have a good attorney, they're going to talk with you about these different situations that could come up that you want to make sure you plan for and allow room for these things to happen. So I do appreciate y'all tuning in today. I appreciate, I don't know how you what the name stands for, but it's like Resner or something like that. RNSER. I appreciate your contributions and three striped life beater. Okay. Thank you for tuning in and sharing your feedback as well. Robin, thank you, Robin, for tuning in. I appreciate y'all for being with me these past few days for this Kwanzaa reflections on Heirs property. I'm not gonna do this every day moving forward, but I have really enjoyed it, and so I do plan to do it at least once a week. Every day has been hard, especially with the kids being home, because like the time of day I've been doing them, it's like prime time. But I said I was gonna do it this time, so it's been good. But moving into the future, probably gonna do it once a week. Gotta see when I'll do it. For those of y'all who've been showing up, y'all let me know when y'all want me to talk. Maybe I can coordinate that. I can't guarantee it, but we'll see what we can do. But thank y'all so much for tuning in. I might come back and do a Kwanzaa reflection on the first principle of Kwanzaa, which is Umoja, unity, Umoja. I missed it because I got the idea on that day, and so I didn't have time to record a video because I had already recorded 2 videos that same day. Y'all go back and check them out. But neither of them were about Kwanzaa because I didn't get the idea until I was finishing up the second video. And by then I wasn't doing another video. But I might do one for Umoja. We'll see. We'll see how tomorrow goes. But either way, I thank y'all for tuning in, and I thank you so much for your participation. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, tell a friend about it if you think it's helpful. Add some comments after the video publishes so that I can know what I should talk about next. Y'all just, let's stay engaged and talk with each other and continue this conversation forward. I wish everyone an amazing new year. We got to be very intentional about how we go about this year, because we don't want it to just thank y'all so much for liking. I see everybody done liked. But we don't want this year to just get away from us. We want to be the ones in the driver's seat for at least the part of our lives that we can control. Like, we can't control everything, but we can control how we think and how we act as far as things within our little realm. Somebody said, any recommendations for a land lawyer in Northwest and or Central Florida? So there is Jamie, I want to say Coleman. I'm not gonna get this right. I'm not gonna get it wrong. Yeah, Jamie Coleman. She is in Tallahassee, Florida. I don't know what part of North Florida that is, but Jamie's in Tallahassee. And then I have a law school colleague. I don't know how much land he does, but his name is Paul Monsanto, and he is in, I think, Central Florida. I know he does probate. Yeah, he's in Tampa. Paul Monsanto. He does probate, which I'm sure that he probably ends up doing some heirs property and family land stuff. So try either of them. They might be able to help. Jamie Coleman, Jami Coleman, or Paul Monsanto. And let them know Veronica sent you. Again, thank y'all for tuning in. If anybody else need recommendations before I hop off, it's your chance now. I'll pause for a few minutes, but otherwise, I'm gonna go ahead and Texas. Okay, got one for Texas. Okay, so I have LD Homes. So LD Homes. He's in Texas. He's in Dallas, I think. I think he's in Dallas. But he's an attorney there. He goes to a lot of the heirs property conferences that I go to, so he knows family land stuff pretty well. And then there's also, I haven't met her before, but I see her on YouTube. Alicia Melvin, I think is her name. Alicia, yeah, Alicia Melvin ESQ. She's on YouTube as well. And I know she's in Texas. So either LD, I do this every time. It's not LD Holmes. Ignore what I said. LD Thomas. I'm sorry, LD. If you ever watch this, I don't know why I do that every time. LD Holmes. That's why I mean LD Thomas. That's why I couldn't find it. Yeah, LD Thomas, attorney at law. Yep. There he is. So I will shout out these folks in the comments a little later. And I appreciate y'all. Okay. Yes, I'm glad these recommendations were helpful to y'all. That's why our network is so important. We have this heirs property practitioners network, which is a lot of attorneys around the country who work on heirs property. We started out so small. It was like a room full of us, but now we have maybe 200. It's over 100 people who are part of this network. So definitely happy to provide recommendations when I know them. The people I was able to call out on this call are people who I've known for a while. Others I may have to kind of send an email out to the list. But these folks are folks I've known for a while, and I know they are the real deal. So thank y'all so much. We will be back again for something soon. I'll let y'all know. I'll put it on the community. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so that I can keep you updated on when we'll be doing our lives on a more regular basis. Take care. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Heirs Property Day associated with Juneteenth or Kwanzaa. I have to think about that. That's a good idea. Think about that. If you don't start it, maybe I will. We'll see. Y'all take care.